When I moved to Australia when I was about 30 years old, I wanted nothing to do with cycling ever again. I'd had enough of it. It was the same people, the same races, the same roads. I moved to Australia and I started kiteboarding. I saw them with the kites and on the surfboards and stuff. And that's what I wanted to do. Let's use the wind for something fun instead of, in the gutter. And, eventually cycling pulled me back, and it was new people, new races, and I was just trying to get fit again. And then I just had this whole second wave of life in my cycling. It was awesome. It was the best experience in cycling I've had here in Australia. It still continues to be.
Welcome to another episode of the Ride to Success podcast. The podcast that takes you on a learning journey for a more productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. I'm your host, Pedro Couto Lopes. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name. And in the podcast, I explore cycling's global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. In today's episode, I'm thrilled to sit down with Wade Wallace, founder of CyclingTips and Ecape Collective, to uncover his remarkable journey in the cycling industry. From the challenges of building multiple businesses to the personal lessons he has learned on the bike, Wade shares candid insights that will inspire cyclists and entrepreneurs alike. This episode is brought to you by Bike Rent Manager, the world's best all-in-one bike rental software. If you're looking to streamline your operations, boost your revenue, and stay ahead of the competition, Bike Rent Manager is the only reliable and efficient system that improves customer experience and satisfaction. Whether you run a small rental shop or a global fleet, Bike Rent Manager has you covered. Learn more on their website, www.bikerentalmanager.com. But before we dive in, I have a quick favor to ask. If you're enjoying the podcast, please hit follow and leave us a review or a rating on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps me bring more incredible conversations like this one to you. So, all right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Wade Wallace. Enjoy. Welcome to Ride Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thanks, Pedro. It's really cool to be here after meeting you at Eurobike. It was nice to actually meet someone in real life beforehand and then get to do this.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you are a massive personality. You have a heavy weight in the cycling industry as a journalist. And I just wanted to start the conversation by asking you, because as a journalist, you spent a lot of time telling stories, interviewing people. But how do you feel about being on the spotlight yourself? And has it got any easier, like being interviewed, being the subject of interest?
Yeah, I got to say, I'm not usually on this side of the mic. And no, I'm not used to it, if I'm honest. I'm deeply uncomfortable listening to myself speak, even on my own podcast. It's funny because my son listens to my podcast when he goes to sleep, and he falls asleep to it. So I always say it must be really boring.
But your voice is soothing. That's why.
It's right. But actually, to be honest, I'm not a journalist. I used to be an engineer, and I kind of fell into this by accident. And the ethics of journalism and the processes and all that is something that I've kind of learned through the people I surround myself with. I've always had a philosophy of hiring much better and more capable people than myself, so that I'm not the ceiling of, success or competency. So I wouldn't at all claim to know about what makes good journalism unless I see it. But I just like telling great stories and drawing them out of people. And that's usually a pretty safe way to sort of navigate things. But every once in a while, things come up that I have to lean on my colleagues for sure.
I mean, I guess, if that is anything to take away from what you said, is that that's a sign of a good leadership, is that you recognize that there are people with better skills than yourself, and then you're able to see the potential in other people and recognize their abilities and trust them that they can do a better job than you can. So that in itself is a good sign to start this conversation, because I wanted to touch a little bit on that as well, because You have founded CyclingTips, you founded Ecape Collective. And I mean, you have told the stories and the journeys of founding these businesses countless times. And I wanted to try and kind of pull the curtain slightly on these stories, because I'm sure starting both these businesses, there have been moments that really shaped you as a leader, as a journalist. Perhaps you don't.
Yeah.
You just said that you don't see yourself as a journalist, but okay. Let's pause that for a moment, and we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in is through this journey from you started as an engineer, founded CyclingTips, Ecape Collective. What shaped you the most behind the scenes that doesn't often get seen?
I think something that doesn't get seen is the loneliness of, not only starting a business and then really, trying to find people who kind of connect with your vision and mission. And those first couple hires are the toughest because you're alone. And then you start hiring people. And my first hire was one of the biggest steps of my entire life. And his name was Matt Denif, and he's still with us today. And not only finding someone who I trusted and I was confident could do my job better than myself, and someone who could grow with the business, but also, you can't share everything with your employees either. At that time, I felt I couldn't, because, there's a lot of financial stress. There's a lot of maybe fake it till you make it in many ways, the confidence you have to put on, and nobody to really share that weight of the world on your shoulders, or so it feels like. That is a big thing that I still struggle from to this day. In this business, Ecape Collective, we're operating with a transparency that I've never operated with before, in terms of we open our financials to our staff if they want to see them. We nearly go that far with our members and audience. I don't show them our balance sheet because I don't want competitors to see that, but I do operate with this level of transparency that sometimes I'm really uncomfortable with. The nice thing about that too is it keeps me really, really accountable. And there's no separate stories between our staff and our members. There's no faking it till you make it or anything like that. And it's just maybe a way of operating that doesn't feel like I'm carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. I'm not trying to make it look bigger than we are or anything. But it still can be lonely sometimes. I tell you, there's a lot of financial pressure that people love telling you how to spend your money without having to actually be accountable for spending that money, right? And it's coming from all directions. So there's still that weight. I never felt that weight off my shoulders, but I think I'm getting better at that. And that's just maybe one example of something that I don't talk about often, is it can be very lonely. I have good people around me. Sorry, I should also acknowledge that I have really, really good people around me this time around who I can trust, who will share that weight, and also who will give me really, really good advice. And maybe it comes with age where you don't feel like you should know everything. I think every person who owns a business feels like their responsibility to kind of like say that I know this because I own a business, therefore people expect me to know this. And I think over the years I've gotten better to be vulnerable and ask for help, and not only ask for help, but put structures of help around me so that I don't have to do all this alone. I don't have to carry all this weight alone. And I'm still getting better at that. But, setting up a board of advisors, for example, was the first thing I did with this business versus asking for informal help. And accountability, it helps with a lot as well. So, yeah.
I mean, it's interesting to hear the kind of founder stories, because you are able to tell, I guess, the differences in their journeys, in how some of them are very driven and are able to only at a later stage recognize that they need help to grow the business, but others, I mean, with more experience, recognize that no, I did it now. I need, for this business to grow and to expand, I need better people helping me, or someone acting as a sounding board. I mean, you mentioned about the being lonely as kind of like a founder. Has there been times where it's just... So let me rephrase this question. Has there been any times where you had the help of a mentor or someone that you seek like advice on a continuous basis?
I have used to have many people I would go to and sort of accumulate little bits of advice depending on where I need it, whether it was accounting and financials or marketing or whatever. But the person who was probably one of the biggest mentors to me, who didn't really sign up to be a mentor, but when I worked with Rafa, Simon Mottram was my boss.
Right.
And this was the time when I had a meeting with him every Tuesday, and the business was very small, and he was still, hands-on with most of the things. Not that I would call Simon up for advice, but I got to understand his way of thinking in some ways, not every way, but I would often ask myself, what would Simon do in this situation? And his way of thinking was really unique, and I don't think I've ever met anyone as perceptive as him. And
right.
He also, like, I did see him in more intimate workshops and stuff. And he wasn't this guy who just had this absolute driving vision that he didn't listen to anybody else. He absolutely did. He collaborated on equal footing with all of his staff, and he was excellent that way. And I remember just once, I took a lot of things from him, but one thing that just really stuck in my head was he said, if you want to grow, you have to release control. And because we were just in our separate markets doing all sorts of crazy things that we thought was within the Rafa brand. And looking back, it wasn't. And how uncomfortable that must have made him feel, thinking back, would have been astounding. But he didn't show it. He knew to trust us, knew to give us some guardrails, but also that he would never grow beyond just himself if he didn't release control to us. So there was lots there I learned. There were many other things that he taught me as well, but he still is awesome. I'm really privileged to have worked for him. And another guy too, Slade Olson. Was a colleague of mine who started was the GM of the US business. Slade was probably one of the most, I don't want to say under-recognized, but like his name doesn't hit the main, Rafa list of credits like it should. He was fantastic and still is fantastic, and I still keep in touch with Slade.
I don't know Slade. I know Simon. I guess that will resonate with many people, that the fact that you rely on someone, well, not rely necessarily, but you look up to someone sometimes and you seek advice from them because they have more experience. You can find a way of looking forward, and it just acts as a mentor. So that those figures in any business, any founder story, there will always be a person that, or multiple people, that really kind of help prop this person, the founder, to look beyond the daily struggles. Because as I'm sure you have plenty of stories, war stories, and in the beginning of sacrifices of building these platforms. So, I mean, to that, is there been something that building CyclingTips, Ecape Collective, has there been any kind of maybe challenges that you actually? Let me phrase this question, because you founded CyclingTips, and then obviously that fell through, and you created Ecape Collective. I'm sure there's learnings that you've taken from CyclingTips, and now you have applied to Ecape Collective, and you're much better after. Is there anything that through building Ecape Collective, that you never anticipated to happen after having the experience of building CyclingTips?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there's a certain there's really something to be said for the saying, ignorance is bliss. If I knew what I was getting into when I started CyclingTips, which was an accidental business, by the way, it was just my blog, right? At the time, it was maybe considered an early influencer. I had a blog, I wrote every day. It was what it was. And but I never intended to make that a business, and I didn't know what was around the corners. And it was just taking it day by day, and then money started coming in. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. And then next thing you know, you're sort of caught feeding the machine, and then you start having employees and responsibilities and pay their wages. And if you don't have money in the bank, you still have to pay their wages, right? And so that all happened, but I figured it out on a really short-term basis, and then it started looking long-term as this became this commercial endeavor. But now, when we started this, I do have the benefit of being able to see around those corners, and I've kind of seen many of the things that I figured I'd encounter in the present. And we planned for those, and it's all the things I didn't plan for that kind of came back to bite me. How would you know if you couldn't plan for them if you didn't know about them?
Of course.
So,
well, I was just going to. What can you explore a bit more? What are those things, or is that trade streaks?
Well, no, there's no secrets. I've talked about this openly internally, but we had a number of cultural issues to start with, right? Which I was like, wow, this is mainly the same group who has decided to come over, and this isn't the same. People are feeling maybe unappreciated or not part of the team, or they seem to have better memories of CyclingTips and where it was going than this. And I was like, where is this coming from? This is really unexpected. And there were a lot of cultural issues that I had to overcome at first. And I thought I was the best boss in the world at CyclingTips, right? It was natural. It was like, come on this journey with me, guys. And it got easier as it got bigger. And I mean, it definitely had its tough times, but culturally, you couldn't think of, I can't think of too many better cultures internally that I've experienced. This time, it didn't carry over. And the other thing that didn't carry over was just simple processes like, maybe expense approvals or boring stuff like that, right? But it's like, hold on, like, why didn't those processes carry over here? Because it's going to be the same process, but we didn't have it written down and communicated. And I'm like, wait a minute, why isn't this carrying over either? So it was a million things I had to rebuild that I didn't think I'd have to rebuild, whether it's documenting the process or cultural changes. And I'll be the first one to admit that I'm not an expert in creating cultural change in, say, 20 people right off the bat. That I really had to learn and was very completely ignorant to, right? And
how do you go about creating cultural change? Because that's a massive thing for any business leader, for any founder, because you can't persuade a person, but how is it to persuade a group of people to, because you really need to, I guess, inspire them and also listen to their needs and what they. I'm guessing. I'm not I'm not the founder here.
No,
well, how is it that journey? How does it look like?
Myself, like many people, I used to think that mission and vision and purpose and values were just a bunch of words, right? And they're not. I've really understood the value in communicating where we're headed, right? And I use the analogy of we're all on a bus together, right? The business can't run if we're all on the steering wheel taking lefts and rights and that. But
exactly. No.
As a leader of a business, I learned that I got to tell everyone the direction of the bus. This is where we're going, right? But giving people a window seat, a front row seat, a choice in how we get there. I mean, we might take this left and a right, or we might go left and right, or we might go in a straight line or whatever. The execution of that is up to them, but they need to know where we're going. And that's a very simple analogy, and the way you actually implement that in the group is much more difficult. But this is where my biggest mistake is not giving them the autonomy in deciding how we're going to get there. And I don't want to be micromanaging, right? I want to give them a framework to do their best work and to be able to do their best work and the freedom such that we're going to get from A to B. I'm confident in that. But how we get there, it's never going to be a straight line. We're going to keep moving forward, but it's never going to be a straight line. And giving them the autonomy to experiment, to fail, to succeed.
Yeah.
And trusting them and making them know that I trust them to do that. So that was very different than when I started CyclingTips. And I still had, a very clear direction of where we wanted to go. But the interesting thing is that going from that business to this business, like my values haven't changed. My purpose hasn't changed. I can't fake another one, right? But it has to actually, that was my journey, but this one is our journey. And that needed to come from kind of everybody in many ways, not where we're going, but things like our values and things like that. And then you have something to check these things when someone does something that is like, wait a minute, like we all came up with these values together. How does that align to these values or where we're going? Well, that doesn't really align here. And you guys all came up with this. So it's really easy for people to sense check that, right? I've learned a lot about that. And it sounds really easy and obvious and everything saying it, but I didn't experience that this time around. And there was just a lot of change that was needed. And I had to really open myself up, be vulnerable, and make sure that everyone knew that they had a say in this. The other side of it, the coin, though, is that there are 1,000 decisions that need to be made at the beginning of a business. You cannot do that by consensus, right? You just have to make decisions, move on. What's our logo going to be? That looks nice, move on. And there's a million pretty fundamental decisions that need to be made. You can always change later, but that's maybe where I want to say, like, that's maybe where people might have felt left behind and the need for this was required. So an example of an unexpected, I guess, challenge at the start of this business, which I never anticipated. And I'm still learning. I'll always be learning.
Yeah, it's challenging. You taking a group of people and getting them to buy into the vision, your vision. In this case, it takes time, I guess. It's not. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's constantly evolving, as you pointed out. And I think this kind of this informs as well the depth of experience that you have, and having started the CyclingTips and now Ecape Collective is always the kind of the business is like all the cogs are moving forward, and you're just trying to just align so that everyone is focused in those goals that people have agreed on or they have bought into, which is, as you said, easier said than done because it needs constantly to be as a culture, it needs to be constantly cultivated because you can't just say once and then expect everyone will do that because it doesn't work like that.
No, it's absolutely true where you say something, you have to reiterate it, say it in a different way, tell a story about it, write it down. Everyone creates their own story internally based on their own experiences of what that means, right? So you have to have a way of giving people something to run with that they can interpret. And that's it's difficult. Like when again, at CyclingTips, everything was so organic. I didn't think about this type of stuff as what's going to be my mission statement or anything. But the beauty of cycling was kind of our tagline. And it was a bit of it was really lucky because it just seemed something that connected with so many people, the audience, but also our members. And we run everything through that filter. And then when people ask, what's CyclingTips? All anyone had to say was, it's the beauty of cycling. And then you could expand on your own story from there, but it was pretty close to what I would have said, right? Okay. And we spent a long time thinking, what is our equivalent? I still think it's the most beautiful sport on earth, but I don't want to recreate that, right? What is everybody's, thought on what our tagline should be? It's not a mission. It's not a vision. It's just something that really allows us to articulate what we're about really quickly and then expand from there. And we came up with, I don't know if you saw the show Ted Lasso.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen it. No.
there was this guy who was like, football is life. And it was just such a joyous statement. And he was such a positive person. And someone said that in one of our meetings. And I'm like, that's it. It's riding is life. It is just with the background of that Ted Lasso story.
Yeah.
It was like, that's perfect. That is it. That is the one. Because I know every enthusiast, that is kind of all they think about outside of their family and work, right? If you're anything like me.
Yeah. I mean, it's totally makes sense. I mean, the cycling when as a hobby, you take it for it just builds and builds. You meet a lot of people that ride bikes, wherever the discipline it is, and they really enjoy it. Both the benefits that it brings to them, the joy, I guess it gets ingrained in you. It's like it gets under your skin.
Yeah. I never encountered another sport like it. I've played a million sports, and nothing has grabbed me like cycling has. I remember in my former career, I'd be looking out the window, thinking about riding my bike, seeing someone ride their bike, wishing I could ride my bike. My next vacation was going to be on my bike. My weekend was going to be about bike racing, or I rode my bike to work. Like it gets into every avenue of your life, whether it's competitive or travel or commuting to work or whatever. Not everybody, but that's, I think, a lot of people, right? And I certainly feel it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you perhaps stand out in the fact that you know that the riding bikes, as you longed to get on a bike and be out and riding it. And for you, that's perhaps was like the, I want to be riding my bike, so you wanted to be out, and that was driving you forward to be more involved in cycling, to follow the stories that happen in bike racing, and then it just builds from that, and then you get more into the sport. And I guess and then you started CyclingTips, the blog. So it's incremental and now you sat down here with me and it's like, right, I built this empire. Here I am.
Well, I wouldn't call it an empire, but it's spot on. Like it doesn't only build, but it changes. And I've seen myself come and go through racing, come and go through just on vacations. Right now, my son is loving it. So now I'm really into riding with him and trying to get him, awesome. Maybe give him some, I don't know, not I don't push him by any means, but just some excitement. These past 2 years, haven't been riding my bike as obsessively as I once did, but I know it'll come back again because I've seen it come and go through my life and change forms. And that's the beautiful thing about it, is that when I'm 90 and I still have good knees and a good back because it's, that's what I do. So, yeah.
I mean, that's I mean, that's a beautiful story because it's just the love for the sport that never leaves, is always there, but it can't always have the same amount of dedication to it, whether through the writing, through managing a business, or through actually riding a bike. It's okay to ebb and flow. That's life happens, so you adapt and evolve. It just is also part of growing a business. It just adapts. You adapt, you evolve, move on. I wanted to kind of, I mean, just on this side of your journalistic side, I mean, you have written countless pieces, you have hosted many podcasts with amazing people. Is there any interviews or stories that kind of profoundly changed your view or approach to cycling journalism?
I can think of ones that I haven't done, but my colleagues have done. My colleagues have done all of anything that's really changed anything has been done by my colleagues. The thing that I've probably done that has traveled the furthest, that I got the most joy out of and was most unexpected, was a series I did. It was a 5-part series on the most obvious question and the elephant in the room about why the industry got into such trouble after COVID. And it wasn't difficult. It wasn't time consuming. It was just hearing about people's stories from all across the world and all across the supply chain that I didn't expect to connect with so many people. It was just this question that I had. I'm like, what is going on here? And everyone's telling me this. And I'm like, why is nobody talking about this? This is fascinating. This is crazy. And this is also the exact same thing that other industries face. Like, nobody's talking about this. And I really asked my own team to go and look into this. And for some reason, I think sometimes when you're so close to something, you don't think it's as interesting as maybe others do. So I wasn't so close to it. And I'm like, I'll do it if you guys aren't going to do it. And, you know, I got contacts and stuff from whether it's my own lists or a colleague's lists. And I just went all the way up the supply chain from bike shop to manufacturing and got their stories. But what I didn't expect was that these stories of, you know, a woman named Ellery who owns bicycle garage or sports garage in Boulder, Colorado, was the exact same story as someone across the world, maybe in Australia, would have experienced. And same with distributors. And nobody was talking about this amongst themselves. And everybody had the same story and experience. And out of the woodwork, as I was releasing the podcast, more and more people wanted to come and share their experience. So some of these I was able to put in, some of them was too late, but that was probably just one of those ones where it's like, just sometimes ask the obvious questions if no one's talking about it. And I know I always tell our people, like, something great that travels far doesn't need to be difficult always. It just needs to be sometimes obvious, sometimes the elephant in the room that nobody's talking about. And I don't know if that answers the question you asked, but it was just a recent example of something that maybe caught me off guard, that was traveled as far as it did, maybe for something that long as well.
I mean, listening to your answer, it stresses the point of the simplicity of the question. You know, sometimes you try to overcomplicate the questions, or you're trying to look for a difficult angle to get out of the person that you're interviewing. But sometimes are the easy questions or the most obvious questions, and they're like that get the people talking more openly or just without reservations. So I guess that's a point to take when, I mean, that's when you're trying to connect to another person, to another human being, that's what you do. You ask them easy questions, you ask questions that are obvious, and then you build on from that. So that's just establishing a connection, human bond, if you will.
You want to know something else I learned from Simon Mottram? Is the power of a story. I knew this, but I didn't experience this until I worked at Rapha. And, you know, how Simon would put little stories inside every garment, or tell stories, and kind of, you know, just under Rapha's brand, he would tell stories that I thought I knew a lot about cycling, and I'm discovering loads more of cycling history because of this brand. And we're not a brand that is, you know, creating its identity through storytelling necessarily, like maybe Rapha, but that's what we do, is we're storytellers. And I do tell our journalists quite often that whether it's a small news piece or a bigger piece, we're storytellers. And when you wrap things in a story, it can be so powerful, rather than facts and figures. You know, people sometimes want to know that with maybe product reviews or whatever, but the most effective way to get a point across is try to tell a story. And that's what I'm always looking for. It's just a remarkable thing, and that's all we are, right? We're storytellers, and I look for that everywhere. It frustrates me I can't tell more. I come across 10 a day, easy.
I mean, it's kind of obvious, but at the same time, it isn't. It's just that the fact of telling stories is how you connect. But there is an art to telling stories. Not everyone can tell them as equally good as someone else. Some people have the gift to just be more engaging, have a better writing skills or hooks, how to hook a person into the story and then tell it. So I think it's easier said than done when you know, telling that story is not always as straightforward as just blurting out some facts and figures about a particular side of cycling, perhaps.
Yeah.
So there's
I
an
find
art
it
to
helps.
it.
I'm usually over prepared. I try to know the story as well as the person telling it in case they're not very good at telling it. Often I don't know if they're going to be good. And sometimes it doesn't go as planned, and you got to kind of fill in the gaps with editing and, you know, whether it's writing or podcasting or whatever. But the times where I'm not prepared and I kind of just think I'll just wing it are sometimes the worst ones I've done. And I got to do the most work on the back end and post production or whatever to get that out. I did one last week, which it was just that. Right. So I'm not, sometimes you got to fake it.
It's I mean, it's interesting. I mean, thanks for sharing that, because that reveals like behind the curtain. It's so the process, and, you know, the process of writing, podcasting, or it applies to many other things. You know, some people require that level of preparation. Some people don't, like, are happy just to just go with it. It's interesting to also have that perspective from your side. But this is very subjective, because I spoke with a guest yesterday, and he told me, you know, the best podcasts that I record are just people connecting one-to-one. I just go with the flow and then build on from that. So it's a good to have those different perspectives.
There's an absolute danger. Sorry, there's an absolute danger in doing it the way I do, where you try to stick to a narrative, and because it's the story you want to tell, and it's a good idea. Like you do every interview, like, what story do I want to tell out of this interview? But you don't have the flexibility to sometimes go outside of that. And there's a danger in the way I do it. And to your point with the person you spoke to, there's sometimes the gold you discover in that method is far, far greater. You know, Mitch Docker, for his podcast, Life in the Peloton, Mitch is he is so naturally good at conversation. And I listen to anything he does, and I love speaking to him because it always, you know, goes off into weird directions, and you just have a good laugh with him. And I think that's what the appealing part of his podcast is, which is I don't have that natural skill that Mitch does. So I have to go about it in a different way, but you get a different product out of it at the end too.
Exactly. Totally fine. It is also the way that your experience has informed that, because through interviewing people, crafting that story with time, that lends itself for you to just look at a person and research, prepare, craft those questions, and then edit it. So the craft that you developed for years now, it's kind of has become a process. So it's easier to follow that process than to do something different than that, because I guess that's it's just it's like anything else in life. If you do something for a long time, that becomes part of how you do things. And going outside of your comfort zone, it takes a huge risk, and it's not going to be great at the start. They say it takes time to develop.
I always say, fail while nobody's listening or reading or watching. You know, that's the great thing about this is that, you know, when you start, nobody's even paying attention, right? And if you didn't get better, if you didn't cringe when you look back at what you first did, that would probably mean you weren't getting better. And I look back at the stuff I was doing at CyclingTips, and I'm like, oh my God. But that means I've progressed too.
Exactly.
Look at it that way. Yeah.
You have to look at the past to inform the future. It's if you don't look at the past, you are bound to make the same mistakes, because you're not learning from what you've done. So it just is, I guess, is a necessity. That's what I want to say.
Yeah.
I wanted to, I mean, we haven't touched on this, but because I wanted to, like, without shifting the gears too much here, I wanted to still go back to your your founder journey, because you have talked about the difficulties that you had, managing a team, the financial struggles that comes with it. And this is a topic that can be quite recurrent in founders' journeys. Has there ever been a moment where you experienced, you've been close to burning out because you're just so driven in trying to get everything done? Has there been ever a moment where you felt like, oh my God, I can't do this?
I would, 100%. And for different reasons. I remember when I first started, lucky I was young. I was younger because you have all the energy in the world and you don't have kids and you can kind of work from early in the morning till late at night. And, and that was okay. And you didn't get burnt out. And I managed to ride my bike 20 hours a week as well. And that's where most of my good ideas came from and my network came from and everything. Thank goodness I did that when I was younger. Now it's not so easy. You're not getting much out of me after 8:30 p.m. anymore. But I do remember one time, my God, we had sold the business to Bike Exchange. And on paper, it was a really good match because, content, media, and classifieds, buy and sell. It always sort of in newspapers worked hand in hand. It was a really good merger. And they were trying to get into the US market. At the same time, I was trying to grow our US audience and advertising base. And eventually that went pear-shaped. And I didn't have control of the business. There was lots going on in the background conversations that I had no control over the business that I built, the people that I hired, the responsibilities that I took very seriously. And I went into the darkest hole I think I've ever been in for 3 months or something like that. And I couldn't I could barely get out of bed. I couldn't show up for work. I had to put a smiling face on and a confident face to all my employees. Lots was going on there that was, it's a water under the bridge now. It doesn't affect me anymore, but it was a really, really difficult time. And I thought I was going to lose the business. I honestly did. I thought it was all done. And fortunately, I was able to get the business under new ownership and rebuild it. And this was with Pink Bike, the mountain bike website. And we were able to sort of leverage their operations, their sales, lots of stuff that they do, which was a great relationship. And we were owned by private equity at the time. And everyone's like, oh, private equity, the worst, well, whatever. Like it's actually, they were great because everything was going well, right? Nobody wants to touch anything when things are going well. And I just think that it really, really showed that we did have a good business. We did have good people. We just needed the right partners. And the same room with the same business, with the same motivations, versus this one that was going this way, we're going this way. There was no mechanisms to work together. And despite me trying, it just wasn't working. So that was a really, really difficult time that we got through. And, everyone says, don't stress about something. But, if you don't stress about it, you're probably not going to do anything about it either. And it's easy in hindsight to say that I shouldn't have stressed about that, but I wouldn't have really worked so hard and fought for my figurative life, the business life, if I didn't see that stress. But that was a really, really difficult period for me. Maybe tougher than leaving outside. Was a very difficult time as well. But it was like, okay, this is the end of the road. I saw that. I saw that the writing is on the wall. The business has gone as far as it can go, and there's no future in it anymore. So that wasn't a hard decision. The only hard decision was, what am I going to do next? I still want to work. I still have lots left in me. I'm not going back to a job sitting in an office talking about, I don't know, whatever technology and stuff like that. So that wasn't that hard of a decision, if I'm honest. But that time at Bike Exchange, when the business was still so much potential left. But what I did learn through that, though, was that no matter how many mistakes I made through that period, they were very public too, right? Like everyone sees the site on a daily basis. Maybe I didn't express it at all, but trying things and moving to different things or whatever, and we had an event that we ended up selling, and like all of these things that feel like a really big deal at the time, people forget and move on as well. So I'm not so scared to try things and fail anymore, because I know that the worst thing that happen will be a firestorm on social media for 48 hours and then people move on, right? So like you got to keep on trying things, and you're going to mess it up. And all of our mess ups are very public. And I think maybe we're more scared of that now because there are lots of people watching, but I still don't think we should be afraid of that. And so there's a lot in there, but certainly been tough times.
For sure. You clearly have gained a lot of perspective from those experiences. But just, looking at those, like with the bike exchange, how did you get yourself out of that rut, if you will? Is that, because now you like with, hindsight vision, is like, you can say that what you just said, I'm not afraid of making mistakes. It's easier for me now to move on. But in that, when you are at that time, feeling the pressure, when life seems to be crushing you, how do you move on?
I tell you, when you need a bike ride the most is sometimes when you feel least like doing it. And I think I've learned through my life that I always feel better. I never regret a bike ride. But sometimes time as well is the only thing that can fix things too. Just having the confidence that time is going to put you in the right direction. And like there's just things that cannot be rushed. There's things that sometimes take months or years, and knowing and having the confidence that time heals everything is something that comes with experience. And I think too, like, I don't know, if I didn't land on my feet through that experience, if we didn't manage moving the business over to Pink Bike, and if I had lost the business, I don't know where I would be. I'm sure riding my bike would have been a big part of my therapy and getting past that. But luckily it didn't. And I think that it wasn't through any stroke of genius or amazing competency. It was just through seeing an opportunity, making the opportunity happen,
right,
and pushing for it. And not everyone gets that lucky though.
For sure. I guess that's also, you mentioned earlier on about the power of the network in meeting people in your early 20s. So that's, I guess I can make that connection that, the power of network can help you then when you're faced with a fork on the road, then you have the connections already, and it's easier to reach out and say, well, I'm here, can you help me go in this direction or that direction? So that is a potential there. So that I wanted to make that link, because you mentioned luck, but luck in itself can also be created. But there's an element of, if you will, engineering luck.
There's a golfer, I can't remember, who says that the more I practice, the luckier I get, or something to that effect. And it's just so perfect.
Exactly. With that, I was kind of, it's there's a tired metaphor of cycling can be symbolized a ride through life. But I think in your case, you have been through kind of a lot of challenges. As I'm sure any founder has been, but your story particularly is interesting to me because you have been through many challenges in founding a business, having it taken over, readapting and restarting. It's like the phoenix rebirth from the ashes.
Yeah.
What's kind of one lesson that that you take from cycling, from riding bikes, that you find yourself applying to your personal life?
That's a good question. And the thing that just popped straight into my mind was, as a young bike racer, I learned really quickly that don't give up. The race is not over until it's over. And the amount of times I would get dropped and then keep on pushing and then realize, wait a minute, there's a million people behind me, or the race changes and they sit up and I catch back on. And I wouldn't have if I just went back to the car. That is just a profound lesson in life for me. That like giving up and not finishing a race unless you can't, it's out of your control is just, I don't know, just it's amazing what can happen when you don't give up. And there's lots of sayings around fail fast, know when to pull the pin, all that. But I mean, you got to learn from your failures, and you got to know when, the situations when you don't give up because you don't know what can happen, or give up, the race is over, you're being lapped, right? So there's certain discretion you got to apply there. But I don't know, that's just probably a very good example.
Yeah, interesting. It touches on the aspect of the experience, but also the kind of the resilience that you need to be successful by any metric that you want to set yourself to. You need to be able to allow yourself the time, the patience, but also the resilience to try and evolve and try and learn how to improve yourself. I think that's very characteristic of people that have started a business and make that business a success.
Gosh, it's so relative, because I remember my first sort of business mentor at CyclingTips, we kind of we put on a whiteboard, what is your ideal business org structure look like? Who's involved? What do they have? What do you have them all doing? And I think there were 5 people on that board, right? Wouldn't it be great if we could get, a web developer or whatever? And and then we outgrew that many times. And I've never once considered a success. In fact, I consider in my own head myself a failure in so many different ways, where a lot of other people from the outside see as success. And it just, I have to sometimes remind myself, when CyclingTips was spoken about in the same sentence as Velo News and Cycling News and whoever else, what? I would have never dreamed. And then things have changed and evolve and that. But I still, I suppose maybe it's like being a bike racer, right? You move to, Cat 4 to Cat 3 to Cat 2 or whatever your grading system is. And there's always another level, right? And you never see yourself. I mean, if you're winning every race, you're probably not in the right grade. But it's maybe similar to that, right? It's you're always chasing something that is never going to be.
I can understand your where you're coming from of not where what looks to the outside world as a success. You don't see it as a success. But that's, I'm taking from my own experience here, is that I'm always trying to be better. So everything that I achieve, whether it is with this podcast, whether it's my personal work, when I do it, it's like, okay, yes, tick, done. What's next? So that there is that drive, that's focus, and the kind of almost tunnel vision. Sometimes it is important to step back and say, well, hold on, that I've already started something here. I've already created something that is, by other people's metrics, it's successful. And yes, it is true. Success is very subjective. It varies from moment to moment, to person. But it's at some point you need to sit down and define, well, what does success looks like to me? Because that's, if from my experience, that can become quite like a hamster wheel. You're just turning, and eventually you'll fall because you're going to burn out if you don't have clear goals or things that you can track.
Can I tell you a little story that maybe just another thing that I learned from cycling during COVID? We did the Cape Epic mountain bike race. One of my best friends and myself, we did the Cape Epic mountain bike race in 2019, and we missed the final stage because my partner got sick. We went back in 2020, and we were turned around because of COVID. We landed. We're like, what do you mean the race is canceled? This is impossible. We've just trained for 6 months for this and spent thousands of dollars. Anyway, it was canceled. And then we were in lockdowns, right? Everybody remembers. And we we were confined to like our sheds on Zwift or within a 5-kilometer radius of here. And the only thing keeping me going was Cape Epic, this goal that it got canceled again, or it didn't get canceled, but we got locked down again. We couldn't go again. Mm-hmm. And so for 3 years, this kept me going, and it kept me in shape, and it kept me mentally sane. And then we finally got to Cape Epic in 2023. We got to the start line. We didn't finish again, right? Like into stage 5, we got sick again. Anyway, at that point, it didn't matter to me. It was like we made it to the start line. And that process, that was just after I'm 51 years old. This is how long it's taken me to truly appreciate the process. Because I know if we got a good result in that Cape Epic, we would have wanted to go back to see if we could get a better result. And I know if we didn't do well, we would have wanted to come back to see if we could have done better.
Yeah.
This is a never-ending thing, the hamster wheel you're talking about, right?
Exactly,
that's why people love golf so much, is because it's so damn frustrating. You're a genius one hit and you're just rubbish the next. Same with bike racing and same with life. And the process was truly the valuable part that came out of that, because it got me through COVID. It gave me enjoyment leading up to it. And actually, it wasn't about the race. It was about getting to the start line. And after that, it's all kind of like, anticlimactic after that, right? So I try to think of every single day as, a privilege to be doing this, see if I can be better than what I was yesterday, keep it moving forward. Like I said, it's not going to be going in a straight line, but just inching forward and trying to appreciate the process and what I'm learning in there, because like we spoke about, like success will never be reached. And once you learn the process is where the enjoyment is, I think I'm far better off for it anyway. I can't speak for others, but that's what I have learned over many, many years, far too late in life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when you talk about the process, whenever I talk about the journey, it's so important, because if you recognize that the process is more beneficial to the necessary outcome, then you start to enjoy it more. Like you said, you start to value it more, and it becomes bigger than the outcome. I think that's you get also more enjoyment in life, because you're not focused on just getting from A to B. You realize that the journey itself, from getting from A to B, is where you can find fulfillment, you can find joy, because that's the everyday of working towards something. And I mean, we're getting quite deep here.
Well,
but yeah, it's true.
I've had the pleasure of interviewing many and being friends with many pro and ex-pro cyclists. And the one standout thing that most of those people who have reached a really high level are focused on the process, not the outcome. And the people who are focused on get angry if they don't win a sprint, or I don't know, whatever, they don't end up going very far, not nearly as far as the people who do value the process and value consistency and showing up every day and putting the work in. And I always say you overestimate what you can do in a day and underestimate what you do in a year or a week or a month. And it's so true. Just consistency and valuing the process and putting the effort in.
Yeah, very true. Very true. I wanted to kind of, build on that experience that you told us about, Cape Epic. The enjoyment that you have from cycling, riding your bike, because you have raced bikes, you still enjoy riding your bike, and you see, from what you told us, you will see yourself as a 90-year-old riding your bike. So, from when you started riding bikes, or was like watching cycling, actually, I mean, let's talk about first riding bikes. It seems to be have a kind of a change. What has changed for you? What does it mean for you riding bikes now than what it meant for you when you were a 20-year-old? Because from what you've been telling, there has been a shift in the perception. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was a young, in my 20s racing, I was one of those people who, of course, sort of sought validation out of results and that. And and yeah, and then as time went on, when I moved to Australia when I was about 30 years old, I wanted nothing to do with cycling ever again. Had enough of it.
Right.
It was the same people, the same races, the same roads. I moved to Australia and I started kiteboarding. I saw the kites and on the surfboards and stuff. And that's what I wanted to do. Let's use the wind for something fun instead of, in the gutter. And, eventually cycling pulled me back, and it was new people, new races. And I was just trying to get fit again. And then I just had this whole second wave of life in my cycling. It was awesome. It was the best experience in cycling I've had here in Australia. It still continues to be. But then, like when I started CyclingTips, the racing kind of went down. When I worked with Rafa at the same time, I had a harder time to fit in the bike riding. I still ticked along, but I didn't have ambitions with racing anymore. And then, when my career started going downhill, at Bike Exchange or outside, I started racing more. So if I follow my career path, it's kind of inversely to how well my career is going. When my career is going well, I'm not riding much. When I need to escape from it, like when it's going really poorly, like I mentioned earlier, is when I start riding my bike a lot. So, when I start entering more Cape Epics, it's probably a sign that either it's not going well or I found some extra time. That said, I do want to do this gravel burn stage race in South Africa next October. Right. So don't take that as an indication of everything. I've already really want to do that, but it's a year away too. We'll see if I have the time. Yeah. So it's come and gone throughout my life. And I guess I have confidence now to know that if I stop or if I do less, it's going to come back, and I don't have to force it. It always does. I don't worry about getting fat and never riding my bike again or whatever. It always does. It always pulls me back for some strange reason. It serves a purpose in my life, right?
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, because that's so. I think for myself, I'm sure people will resonate with that story, like of the power of the bike to pull you up, just give you more energy to like keep pushing yourself. It's stories like that really touch with other people, really resonate. It definitely resonates with me because I can see myself, as riding my bike and feeling energized, reinvigorating by doing it. Some people call it therapy in motion. Some people call it just an escape. However you want to define it is a way of kind of being, I guess, in the present and being with yourself, and that kind of helps. I think from my experience, and it sounds from, perhaps correct me if I'm wrong, but sounds from what you're telling us, that is also helps to bring you like a new sense of self, because other parts of your life are not going as planned, perhaps. So that's a key. Seems to be a key driver. It's kind of is, I think, can be like said, is the magic of cycling. It's the magic of riding a bike. It's always there, and you can always trust that going out, being in the nature, escaping from the hustle and bustle of the everyday life, give you more perspective into wherever you're facing at the moment.
I tell you, I don't solve too many problems sitting here in front of my computer. Well, they're all solved when I'm on the bike, whether it's my ride to work or whatever it is. That's when clarity and the answers to what I'm trying to figure out just pops up, right? There's something absolutely amazing about it for me that no other sport does. So,
yeah, brilliant. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I wanted to you touched on this already, but I wanted to kind of almost pin you down to answer this question, because it's a question that I ask all of my guests. What does success look like to you these days?
Probably just doing my best to keep the balance and it all sustainable. It's a real easy trap to fall into by thinking that this is a race. If we're talking about business or because there isn't, I wouldn't say there's no rush, but it's only so fast you can build something with the resources we have. And let's be real, we're in the cycling industry, right? Like there's a limited market size. We're not mainstream.
No.
I don't know. So being happy, being sustainable, enjoying it on a day-to-day basis is probably and just, if I'm honest, being profitable so that we don't have to worry about how we're going to pay our staff next month. Those things are ultimately what's going to make me happy, because I've been through some of the trappings of selling a business perhaps too early. In hindsight, though, there was no other decision, and that was, at the time in front of me too, right? So I was dealing with the best decisions I could make. But I think, to your question, the success is this kind of false end that you're always going to keep redefining as you move on, and falling into that trap is dangerous. So enjoying the process and being happy with the process and having time for other things as well is probably something I that's all I ask for. And that to me would be success.
Very good. I mean, it comes, I think, I would like to see myself at that stage, but I think that comes with experience. The business life experience is that, or being just that way inclined. You mentioned top athletes, those very successful ones really enjoy the process. I mean, experience managing multiple businesses, that's kind of the process, being happy with the journey. That's what makes it a success. It takes, I think that takes experience, but it's always important to stress that the importance of the process, the importance of the journey, because if you're not paying attention, then you're missing out on life. You're missing out on the different steps you're making, because you're not focused on them.
Can I give you a little bit of a better answer? That there's certainly a lot of truth to what I just said. But what I tell my team, and what I truly believe, and what I truly really get a lot of enjoyment and satisfaction out of, is the word impact. When we make an impact by the work we do, I remember we helped raise money to get some of the Afghan women's cycling team evacuated out of Afghanistan, because it was a very vulnerable time for them. There was lots of help on the ground and all that, but we contributed to raising money for that. That's an amazing feeling when we can do things like that, or when we tell a story that has huge impact and that travels the world and maybe shapes people's opinion, or changes something, or helps somebody. That is the ultimate way of me measuring day-to-day success, is when we have an impact. And I get just as excited as when one of our employees, one of our journalists does that, as when I do that. I feel the same joy. And that's why I love what we do, because we do have that platform to be able to do that. Sure, some YouTube account might get 10 million views on something that nobody remembers, but we can, when I look at the stats and it's like only 50,000 people consumed that, you got to remember what 50,000 people looks like as well, right? If you've ever been to a rock concert with 50,000 people, you're like, wow. So
that's a lot.
Yeah. So in our little world, it's a lot of people. I don't know how the heck some of these YouTube videos get millions of views. Because I've never seen that many cyclists in my life.
I mean, on that, has there been ever a moment, or, I'm sure you have, when you go to a cycling event, you probably get people coming to you and saying, I listen to your podcast, I read Ecape Collective, I'm a member, you changed my life. Has there been like a particular story that you remember that sticks in your memory from someone that kind of validating the impact that you have?
I've had lots of really just surprising encounters like that, whether it's on the top of a mountain at the Tour de France, where someone approaches me. There was somebody I remember once who asked me to shoot a little video for their wedding, because at their wedding, because the groom loved what we do.
Wow,
Yeah, I got to pinch
that's
myself
amazing.
constantly. I'm never presumptuous that anybody has ever heard of us. And there's sometimes where I've gone in thinking that surely they've heard of us and they haven't. And then other times where I'll be talking to, I'm just trying to think of whether it's a pro cyclist or whatever. I don't know. I'm trying to think of an example, but there's been lots of times where I really am like, wow, like I can't believe that I'm in this situation, or they've heard of what we do or whatever. I mean, just an example of recently. I don't know if you've heard of the website The Athletic. It
No,
is
I haven't.
the New York Times bought it, and they are a lot of what we do is kind of has it modeled off of how they do. They cover everywhere from Premier League to NHL hockey to football, blah blah blah. All the sports, all the teams. If you're into those sports, they're the biggest out there. They're amazing.
Okay.
And had a great business model and everything. And I wanted to meet one of the co-founder of that because he used to work at Strava, and what he did with The Athletic, I'm like blown away at. Anyway, I got an intro to him. I've had a few phone calls with him, kind of like what we're doing right now. And he's like, I was a huge fan of CyclingTips. And he was like, totally knew everything about it. And I'm like, and he was just as excited to meet me as I was to meet him. And I'm like, wow. Like, I thought I was you were doing me the favor. And he was, of course. But there's just one example that was within the past couple of weeks where I'm like, I can't believe I got this call. Number one, this guy's giving me amazing advice and recommendations and experience and everything based on this accelerated 10-year learning that he had through, raising a lot of money and achieving what he did. So yeah, there's lots of things like that, but he was a big deal to me and still is.
Yeah. Very good. So, I mean, yeah, it's always, I guess, it's always wonderful when people validate the impact that you have, and then you can, through the power of the work that you're doing, you have people that come to you, or you are able to connect with people that you don't think it would be possible. I think that's a great measure of success when other people recognize and value the work that you do, because that's ultimately you are connecting, you are making an impact, and you're changing in whatever way, small or big, you're changing a person's life because whether they enjoy reading, listening.
Don't you find podcasts tough in that way though? Because you go and release it and you're waiting for some feedback, whether it's comments, whether it's an email, I don't know. And then nothing for days because people don't listen to them like they would read an art news article. And then there's not the way for people to comment or ask questions or engage or whatever. I always found podcasts really, really a bit of not a letdown, but a real delayed response. And all you see is a number with how many downloads, and you don't even know what that means because, but it is delightful when someone does come up to you.
I mean, it's I haven't had that experience yet, but it's the personal connection, because you see this in multiple times. You have people that are talking, are sharing their stories, and people are listening to it, are spending time, sometimes even more time that they are talking to during a day. They are spending more time listening to you than they are listening to their spouses, their partners. So you create that connection, and yes, you don't see that. You don't have a live audience that you can feed off, like clapping or smiling. So it's difficult to have that level of kind of instant feedback. But that if you really are committed, I think, to what you're doing and like you're passionate about it, people will see through that. They will be interested, and then they will say to their friends, "Oh, have you listened to them?" And then to kind of it starts a chain of events. And if one person is able to come to you and say, "Can you please record a video for my friend's wedding?" you can be sure that there's thousands of people that maybe will not go to those lenses of commitment, but it's it just resonates with people. It's that's I think it's through the experience it comes a bit of, I think you have more experience than I have, obviously, but it is the delayed gratification. Starting a business, being an entrepreneur, starting a podcast. You can't expect things to be, instantaneous, and that's in the today world with social media. Yeah, that's a very slippery slope where you see immediate things like that. But I think with podcasts, you need more time to build those relationships, because it's not instantaneous. So yeah, that's my view.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and it's so difficult by just looking at the numbers, knowing did that have any impact? Like I said before, the impact is kind of how I define short-term success, and looking at the numbers is not indicative of anything, because we've seen it 1,000 times where something might get millions of views or whatever, and you forget about it instantly. The next thing you scroll on, versus I've seen it many times where some of our most impactful work only has maybe 20,000 people. And when I say only, like, again, when you see 20,000 people standing in front of you, it is incredible. So it's just we've got this distorted world with these metrics that have been falsely pumped up. And I know when a YouTube video gets 1 million views in cycling, those are auto plays, are just they're not real, right? They're 3-second views and stuff, and people still chase those numbers, but they're meaningless. Those days are done. Scale and size for the sake of it is meaningless because it is infinite these days, right? So it's a bad thing to follow, but there's nothing better when you just get someone coming up to you and saying, "Hey, like what you did."
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's true connection. Is impact too, by getting back to what you said. And it's like, is that the theory about having the 1,000 true fans? You speaking to that one person, or however many people there are. It's kind of the true fans are the ones that listen, engage with you, and the rest is just it's people that come and go.
Yeah.
So I wanted to now we kind of wanted to now approach at the point of the podcast that where every guest leaves a question to my next guest, not knowing who they are. So the question that was left for you is the following, and I need to read it because it's quite a wordy one.
This is a great idea. I like it.
So the question is the following: what are the brands / organizations that you think are doing a good job or working well to drive inclusion in the cycling space?
Inclusion. Well, I mean, the standout is Zwift. If we're talking about inclusion like gender inclusion and, the race inclusion with,
race and gender. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely with their, I know their staff, their marketing and that. Rafa's doing an excellent job as well. I still know the inside of that company to a point, but it's always been very healthy in that regard. Those are the two standouts that I can think of. It's a really good question, though, and really clever. Carry it forward way of doing things. I like it.
Yeah. I mean, anyone
that stands out to you?
Sorry?
Anyone that stands out to you?
Yeah. I was going to say, Zwift, Rafa are good examples. Live Cycling, I think, is also doing a good job. And there's other more not so global, more specific to the UK, but even more Sisters in the Wild. They are doing good work, which is a organization that is promoting work towards getting more women into cycling, creating a safe space like within women, trans, and like LGBTQ plus, welcoming people into riding bikes. So that's more localized to the UK. I think the examples you gave are great.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
you can only make an impact on your community, right? That it starts there.
Exactly. Yeah. You have to start with the people around you. So I wanted to, now is pass the baton to you, if you will.
Yeah.
What question would you like to leave to my next guest?
The one that's close to my heart that I would like, that's fairly similar, would be what brands do you feel are making a good strides in sustainability?
Mm-hmm.
That is a much more difficult thing to see externally. But so you might have to know the companies a little bit better on the inside, but there's a lot of initiatives going on, and every company's on this different part of their journey with that. And I think everyone knows it's important, but not an easy thing to pull off either. So I'm curious about, acknowledging the brands, and maybe some that I haven't heard of before too, who are doing good work in that space.
Yeah, very good question. I mean, sustainability is a topic that still needs to be talked about more. I probably should have been doing a better job of raising it. But yes, it's definitely a topic that has been had a lot of traction maybe a few years ago. It still needs to be, our brands are still, need to be doing a lot about it. I know that, I think it was either Ecape Collective or CyclingTips that was a founding member of the Shift Active Climate Committee. So that's already, it
Those
shows
guys
already
are doing great work.
They are working with brands to help them reach better goals in terms of sustainability. So
I was very privileged to be. I was extremely privileged to be amongst that group, and they're doing phenomenal work and driving change in the industry, and they're awesome.
Very good. So Wade, I just want to say a massive thank you for sharing your thoughts, sharing the purpose that you have, and pulling the curtain on the kind of the behind the scenes of running the business. I think I've taken a lot from it. I'm sure there's a lot of information that you've shared that people will resonate with, and I really honestly believe that what you shared is really of value to any person that enjoys cycling, but also is in the kind of the journey of running a business, working the cycling industry. So it's a privilege to be able to share this time with you.
Likewise, thank you. I really, really do appreciate it, and love your work as well, Pedro. Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of the Ride to Success podcast. A huge thank you to Wade Wallace for sharing his incredible journey. I hope his insights inspired you as much as they did for me. If you enjoyed today's episode, I really appreciate if you could take a moment to hit follow on your favorite podcast platform, and don't forget to leave a review. It helps more people to discover these conversations and join our growing community of cycling enthusiasts. Now, don't forget, this episode was brought to you by Bike Rent Manager, the ultimate tool to streamline your bike rental operations and improve customer experience at the same time. If you want to know more about Bike Rent Manager, head over to the website www.bikerentalmanager.com, where you can find more about how they can streamline your business. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time on the Ride to Success podcast.